Okay, so thank you very much for having me. I'm having a lovely time. When I report this gathering in the Sydney Morning Herald, I'll say it was fantastic to see 750 people crowded into the large auditorium at the Gailey Club. So when I speak about the Republic, I have to be a little careful because I tell the story of the first time that I became, well, the first day that I became the chair of the Republic movement. My wife Lisa, who you may know from the telly, was right beside me. We were driving back from Thredbo. I did my first interview and I thought it went very well with Fran Kelly. I was very passionate. I put the phone down and I said to Lisa, I said, darling, I think that went pretty well. And she said, darling, if you're going to do this job properly, I want to give you a little bit of advice. I said, what's that? She said, don't play your natural game. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, don't be a loud dickhead. And when I'm talking about the Republic, I do try, particularly with cameras on me, to tone it down a little bit and try to be understanding of the other side and to acknowledge that there are a lot of fine Australians that actually believe that nearly 250 years after Captain Cook landed, we still can't run our own show. Now, it's a legitimate view and there are good people that take that view. I am not one of them. For the Republic movement stands for one thing. We think it ludicrous and embarrassing to maintain in the 21st century that as a country we can do no better than to find our head of state from a family of English aristocrats living in a palace in London. Are we a country or are we a colony? Is it not time that we got this done? I mentioned the 250 years after Cook landing. The first peoples, before there was colonisation, were free and independent beneath the Southern Cross. Who can possibly maintain that 250 years is not enough time to get our shit together to go back to being free and independent beneath the Southern Cross? And there is a very strong Indigenous angle for the Republic movement, and that is that when we do become a republic, it will be a signal to the world and a signal to ourselves that this is not a nation of 117 years history, 118 years history. We haven't been here for 200 years. We haven't been here for 250 years. Our people, we have been here for 65,000 years, and it will be something that will aid reconciliation, recognition, help bring us all together. Against this simple premise that Australia can do better than to find our head of state from overseas, there are many nervous Nellies and Neddy naysayers who say we can't, we won't, we shouldn't, it's not safe. The only thing between us and chaos and civil war is this family in England, and without them we'd be lost, and we must still keep holding on to the hands of mum. And those nervous Nellies and those Neddy naysayers have been with us through Australian history all the way through. At every step of progress we've made of separation, they've been there saying we can't, we won't, we shouldn't. In the 1890s, Australia was beset by the worst depression and the worst drought it had ever seen. The idea came together, why don't we bring the 6 colonies together to form a country of our own? The nervous Nellies and the Neddy naysayers were out in force. It was done anyway, and it has proven to be a success. The next idea was, and it was a bit revolutionary at the time, let's have a flag of our own, an Australian flag. There was an outcry. Why can't we just stay with the Union Jack? It was done anyway, and the Australian flag was formed. And I might say that the Australian Republic movement has no view whatsoever on changing the flag. Nothing at all. We're a one-trick pony. We have no view on the flag, but by God, I do. I'm also on the board of Ozflag, and I love, and I quote constantly the line from Jerry Seinfeld when he came out to Australia in the year 2000, and he said, "I love your flag, Great Britain at night." In the late 1920s, the Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Scullin, came up, some would say a revolutionary idea, I would say an evolutionary idea. And the idea was, instead of having a warmed over British aristocrat or a general for the Australian Governor-General, why don't we have one of our own? Why don't we have a born and bred Australian? And he came up with a selection, and huge resistance from Buckingham Palace and huge resistance from a lot of Australians. And it was fascinating. His selection was Isaac Isaacs, the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, a Jewish man. And this was at a time of rampant anti-Semitism around the world. There were 250,000 Australians who signed a petition to King George to say we can't, we won't, we shouldn't, it's not safe, we can't possibly have Isaac Isaacs as the Australian Governor-General. And the fascinating thing was, their problem was not that he was Jewish. The problem was he was Australian. And the nervous Nellies and the netty naysayers said it would be a disaster, and it wasn't. And in the 1960s, the next evolutionary idea for separation came along. Instead of having the image of the Queen of England on every stamp, on every envelope, let's come up with some Australian symbols. Let's have echidnas, let's have boomerangs, let's have Uluru. There was an outcry. It was done anyway. The same system applied in New Zealand. My dear friend Eric Rush, the former All Black winger, talks about growing up in the Waikato in 1960s in New Zealand, and in 1992 with the All Blacks was presented at Buckingham Palace to the Queen of England, and he said when she came through the door, I was not sure whether to shake her by the hand or to lick her on the back of the head. There was, in the 1970s, a move, you will recall, most of the people in this room will recall, the 1970s, the idea came forward, instead of singing God Save the Queen, let's have an Australian national anthem. Let's start to have our own identity. You remember the outcry? I remember Joe Bielke-Peterson actually said the government, the federal government, can do what they damn well please while my arse points to the ground. Queensland will sing God Save the Queen. It is now unimaginable to go back to singing God Save the Queen. It was done anyway, the outcry from the nervous Nellies and the netty naysayers. And the really big one, 1975, Gough, and I am a great admirer of Gough. I tell the story in 1997, going on a trip to Perth with Mr. Whitlam to do a profile on him. I was with him for 5 days. I've never forgotten them going through the Ansett Air Terminal at Sydney Airport, such as it then was. Mr. Whitlam leading the way, me with the carry-on luggage behind, both his and mine. And as we go through the metal detectors, Mr. Whitlam must have still had his house keys or his car keys in his pocket, because sure enough, there was a sudden like that, and the little guys came in to hover all over him with those metal wand detectors. And Mr. Whitlam, without breaking his stride, said to the man, I think you'll find it's my aura. In 1975, Gough made the proposal that we should cut off appeal to the Privy Council. So prior to 75, and indeed prior to 1986, because the legislation took a long time to go through, if you were not happy with the judgments by the High Court of Australia, you could go to the English law lords to see if they would change the decision. Gough was the one who said, let's trust us. Let's trust our judges. Let's trust our legal judiciary without having appeal to England. Let's run our own show. The outcry was huge. It was done anyway. Was there a disaster? Was there any catastrophe, legal or otherwise? No. We've done it on our own since. In 2018, there remains one last link, and that is the obvious one, where the Queen of England sits atop our entire system of government. We have had the extraordinary situation in 2017 with the whole dual citizenship, and there are many people who call themselves monarchists, who say, in fact say, I'm a monarchist, I'm a constitutionalist, and they act as if when Moses came down from the mount, he had the 10 Commandments, and in his backpack he also had the Australian Constitution. And what we've seen in 2018 is it is a colonial constitution. We've had this extraordinary situation on dual citizenship where that constitution says, yeah, what? You spent 3 weeks of your life as a baby in Canada. Well, you can get the hell out of the House of Representatives. Because if you have one smidgen of the nationality of another country, we don't want your business. But you want to be the head of state of Australia, well, you better be 100% English from that one family and live in Buckingham Palace. Is that or is that not ludicrous? They wiped out 3 senators late last year. They swore in the new 3 senators. They've wiped out those 3 scungy ones over there that were stinking up the joint because of their dual citizenship. Now, you 3 come in, raise your right hand. Do you swear to be loyal to the Queen of England? Seriously? Was there not a problem with this that we can see? So, how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? The rough figures are 50% of the people are Republicans, 25% are monarchists, which is to say, by a factor of 2 to 1, are more Republicans in this country than monarchists, and the final 25% don't care so long as they can keep watching the Kardashians. And what we need to do, we need people like the ones in this room to talk to your friends, talk to your family, sign them up to the Republic movement. I would suspect I'd be batting 98% in this room, but your goodwill and 20 cents won't get me a cup of coffee, okay? We actually need you to sign up as a member to the Republic movement and sign up a dirty dozen among your friends so we get a critical mass. We're forming a fund, a campaign fund, to do this. In terms of the models, a lot of people say that the Republic movement should endorse one model. I say no. I say we are like a toy plane convention at St Mary's Cathedral. We are a very broad church with lots of models that will fly. And what we all need to do is to trust Australian democracy, to trust our fellow Australians in their wisdom to come up with the right model. I am very passionate for one model, and that is the minimalist model. The current system, as you know, is that the democratically elected leader of the Australian peasantry, that's us, the democratically elected leader of the Australian peasants, Malcolm Turnbull, is reduced when he makes a choice, well, whoever the Prime Minister is, democratically elected leader of the Australian people, makes a choice as to who he or she thinks should be the Governor-General, and then is reduced to writing to an unelected lady in England what she thinks about it, the unelected leader of the English aristocrats. So the system is it all right with your unelected Englishness what I, as the democratically elected leader of the Australian people, have decided to do? Is this not humiliating, by the way, for us as a nation, that we still do that? That we still have a democratically elected leader, our leader of the 25 million, has to ask the unelected leader of the English aristocrats, is it okay with you? That's the way it works at the moment. Here would be a new system. Everything stays the same. We stay the Commonwealth of Australia. We call the Governor-General, so we don't go for the whole president. The president has just landed in Air Force One and is making his way from the Air Force Base to the joint system of Congress, blah, blah, blah. We know what a Governor-General is. We understand what a Governor-General is. I say we remain calling the Governor-General as a signal to the people that not a lot will change apart from the symbolism. So new system is we say the Commonwealth of Australia, we stay with the Governor-General. One thing changes. The Prime Minister makes his or her choice, and instead of asking an unelected English lady, is it okay with her, sends it down the hall to the Parliament of the People, the joint session of Parliament, seeking a 2/3 majority. If there is any blockage whatsoever, the position goes to the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia to oversee the Constitution until such time as the blockage is removed. And we all get on with our lives. But there are other people, and there will be many of them in this room, who say, no, the people should have a strong say in who the head of state is. And they may be right. In fact, when we come to the referendum, that probably, I suspect, that will be the one that gets up. Peter Beattie and David Marr are 2 strong advocates for that. And, you know, for me, if that is the choice of the people, so be it. It works very well in Ireland. I had the honour of meeting the Irish President just before Christmas, Professor Michael D. Higgins, when he came out here, and it was fantastic. He dressed wonderfully a group of 500 Australians just next to the Sydney Football Stadium, and I had an epiphany, a sudden understanding of how strong it was to have somebody directly elected like that, because we have a very fine Governor-General in Sir Peter Cosgrove. But when he talks to us, He stands there. Who is he? He's representing the Queen of England. The wonderful thing about Professor Michael Higgins, President Professor Michael Higgins, he was standing there totally representing the people of Ireland. He was the creme de la creme of Ireland. They were saying, this is our man, this is the one we send forth to the world. So, it will be for us to decide. And usually, again, if you've turned up to this event, I suspect it's because you're Republicans. Often when I'm speaking in various parts of Australia, I speak to people that don't care or just sort of a bit vaguely interested. And one of the things I say to the naysayers is, particularly older Australians who may be more conservative in their views and don't want things to change. One of the things I say is, look to the photo of your family last Christmas. There you were, in front of the barbecue. There were 25 of you. You'll recall Uncle Ted, Auntie Mary, Cousin Joan, your niece Esmeralda, all your kids, all the littlies, they were all there. And now compare that photo of your 25 Australians in front of the barbecue to the photo of the Queen of England with her fine family on the balcony at Buckingham Palace last June. And understand that under the current system of the Australian Constitution, every single person on that balcony with the Queen of England, up to and including 2-year-old Princess Charlotte, is automatically more qualified to be the Australian head of state than anybody in your family. And your blessed niece, Esmeralda, she could win the Oscar as the best actor in the world by the age of 25. She could cure cancer by 35. She could give us peace in the Middle East by the age of 45. She could rid us of Pauline Hanson by the age of 50. She could be the most accomplished and revered Australian that ever lived. And yet, under our colonial constitution, she is not deemed good enough and never will be good enough, because all Australian children can aspire to anything they like. They can want to be an astronaut, they can want to win the Oscar, they can want to become a grazier, they can want to do anything they like, bar one thing. The Australian Constitution specifically bans them from aspiring to be the Australian head of state. Why? Because they're Australian. How long can we put up with this embarrassing nonsense? We're going to change it, but we need as many people as we can to sign on and help us. Thank you for your attention.